When they found Olivia Grant's body in that cheap motel room, needle marks dotting her arms, they thought they'd written the perfect ending. Just another junkie who'd lost her way. No one would question it. No one would dig deeper. They didn't count on her son. On a rain-slicked street, an 8-year-old boy runs up to Officer James Calloway, grabs his uniform, and says the words that will unravel decades of carefully buried secrets. "You're my dad. Mom told me to find you if something happened." But James Calloway isn't anyone's father. The DNA test proves it, and now people are dying. Records are vanishing. And a shadowy government program will stop at nothing to get their hands on one little boy. They think they're hunting a child. They're wrong. They're hunting the final move in a dead woman's game. And Olivia Grant just put all her pieces in place. Before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. 110. The evening sun cast long shadows across the cracked pavement as Officer James Calloway approached the front door of a small suburban house. Red and blue lights from his patrol car painted the white siding in alternating flashes, drawing curious neighbors to their windows. The muffled sounds of an argument leaked through the walls, punctuated by the sharp crash of something breaking inside. "Mrs. Walsh," James called out, his knuckles rapping firmly against the door. At 39, he'd responded to more domestic calls than he cared to count, but each one still twisted something in his gut. The arguing inside went quiet. Too quiet. "Police. Open the door, please." His hand instinctively moved to rest on his holstered weapon, not drawing it, but ready. Years on the force had taught him to read situations like this, and sudden silence never heralded anything good. The door creaked open, revealing a woman with disheveled blonde hair and a bruise forming under her right eye. Her trembling fingers clutched the doorframe as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. "I'm fine, officer. Everything's fine." Her voice wavered, betraying the lie in her words. James noticed how she held her left arm protectively against her ribs, a telltale sign he'd seen too many times before. "Ma'am, I need to come in and make sure everyone's safe." His voice remained firm but gentle, the tone he'd perfected over years of similar calls. Someone reported hearing a disturbance. A man's voice boomed from inside, slurred with alcohol and anger. "We don't need no cops here. Mind your own business." James straightened his shoulders, using his full height to his advantage as he addressed the unseen man. "Sir, I'm coming in to ensure everyone's safety. That's not negotiable." His eyes never left Mrs. Walsh's face, watching as fear and relief battled across her features. The next 20 minutes played out like a well-rehearsed dance, the angry husband pacing like a caged animal, hurling threats and excuses in equal measure. The frightened wife trying to minimize the situation, making the same promises she'd probably made before. James maintained his professional demeanor, documenting everything while carefully positioning himself between the couple. "He didn't mean it," Mrs. Walsh whispered as James escorted her to her sister's waiting car. "He just gets this way sometimes when he drinks." The words were so familiar they could have been lifted from any number of similar cases in James's career. "You don't have to go back," he told her quietly, holding the car door open. "There are people who can help, places you can stay." She gave him a sad smile, one he'd seen countless times before. "It's not that simple, Officer Calloway." James watched the sedan pull away, its taillights bleeding into the gathering darkness. His report would join countless others in the system. Another domestic dispute, another cycle of violence temporarily interrupted but not broken. The weight of it settled on his shoulders like a familiar but unwelcome companion. The sun had fully set by the time he finished his paperwork, leaving the street bathed in the artificial glow of sodium vapor lamps. He rolled his shoulders, trying to shake off the tension of the day. One more hour until his shift ended. One more hour until he could return to his empty apartment and try to forget the look in Mrs. Walsh's eyes. That's when he heard it. the rapid padding of small feet on concrete. Dad! Dad! James turned, more out of reflex than anything else. A small boy, no older than 8, was running toward him, tears streaming down his face. Before James could react, the child crashed into his legs, tiny hands gripping his uniform pants with desperate strength. "You're my dad." The words hit James like a physical blow. He looked around, expecting to see someone chasing the boy or calling out for him. But the street had gone eerily still. Nearby pedestrians had stopped to stare. Even his fellow officers, loading equipment into their cruisers, had frozen in place. His partner, Liam Brooks, took a step forward, concern etched on his features. James held up a hand, signaling him to wait. "Slow down, buddy." He knelt, bringing himself eye level with the child. The boy couldn't have been more than 8 years old, wearing clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in days. His dark eyes were red-rimmed from crying, but they held onto James's gaze with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "Hey there, buddy," James said softly, using the same gentle tone he'd perfected over years of dealing with traumatized witnesses. "I think you might have me confused with someone else. I'm Officer Calloway. What's your name?" The boy shook his head violently, his grip on James's uniform tightening until his knuckles showed white. "I'm Evan. You're my dad. Mama told me to find you if something happened." His voice cracked on the word "mama," fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. James felt his throat tighten. "Evan, that's not possible. I don't have any children. Where's your mother? Is she nearby?" "Mama's gone," Evan whispered, his lower lip trembling. "She said you'd come for me. She promised." A small crowd had gathered now, watching the scene unfold. James could hear the whispers, see the judgmental looks being cast his way. Some had their phones out, no doubt recording the encounter. His skin prickled under their scrutiny. "Officer Calloway?" A woman stepped forward from the crowd, wringing her hands nervously. She was middle-aged, wearing a postal worker's uniform, her face etched with concern. "I live in the apartment complex down the block. I've seen this boy wandering around for the past few days. His mother, Olivia Grant, she passed away about 3 weeks ago." The name hit James like ice water in his veins. Olivia Grant. He hadn't heard that name in nearly 9 years, but it still had the power to make his heart skip a beat. Memories he'd buried deep came rushing back. Her smile, her laugh, the way she disappeared without a word. "That's not possible," James muttered. More to himself than anyone else, he looked at Evan again. Really looked at him. The boy's features were nothing like his own, but there was something in those eyes that made him pause, something familiar and haunting.